After reflecting on the illusion of there being any final truth, another realization begins to surface. Understanding rarely moves in straight lines. We like to imagine progress as a ladder. You climb step by step until you finally reach the top. But when I look at the way human understanding actually developed, it doesn't look like a ladder at all. It's more like a spiral. We return to the same questions again and again. We revisit ideas we thought we had already settled. But each time we return, we're not standing in the same place we were before. We've changed. Our experiences have multiplied and have changed. The world around us has changed. So the insight we encounter the second time around is not quite the same as the one we encountered the first time. For now we have the experience of the first time and the one we have now. What once seemed simple begins to reveal more layers. What once felt certain invites a second look. What once looked like an ending turns out to be the beginning of a deeper understanding. The ancient traditions noticed this pattern long ago. In the Hebrew wisdom literature, for example, the book of Ecclesiastes observes something that sounds almost surprisingly modern. What has been is what will be. There is nothing new under the sun. At first, that sounds pessimistic, but I don't think it's really saying that nothing changes. Instead, it points to the fact that human beings keep returning to the same core questions. Questions about meaning, justice, suffering, purpose, and the nature of reality. Every generation faces those questions again, but each generation faces them in a slightly different world. Later, with Rabbinic Judaism, this idea of returning to the same truth took on a very practical form. Sacred texts were not simply preserved and left alone, they were studied, debated, and discussed across centuries. Scholars would read the same passage again and again, asking new questions each time. The goal was not to lock the meaning of the text forever, the goal was to keep the conversation alive. In that sense, the tradition itself became a living dialogue. Something similar appears in the teachings attributed to Joshua of Galilee. In one passage, he describes a wise teacher as someone who brings out their storehouse, things both new and old. It's a beautiful image. Wisdom doesn't throw away the past, but it doesn't freeze it either. Instead, it draws from what came before while discovering new meaning within it. The old and the new are not enemies, they belong together. The Buddhist tradition expresses this same idea in a different way. The path, described by Siddhartha Gautama, isn't about receiving a single revelation and then stopping the search. It describes more like a gradual awakening. Insight deepens over time through reflection, meditation, and experience. Each step forward reveals something that wasn't visible before, and often, when people return to earlier teachings later in life, they discover meanings they completely missed the first time. Taoist thought also leans in this direction. The opening lines of the Tao Te Ching remind us that whatever we say about the Tao or the way, the deeper flow of reality, can never fully capture it. Words point towards the truth, but they can't contain the truth. That's why people can read the same passage from the Tao Te Ching many times across their lives and discover something different each time. The same applies to the Bible and any sacred text. The text don't change, the reader has changed. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus expressed something similar when he said that you cannot step into the same river twice. The river is flowing, the water is constantly moving, and the person stepping into the river is also changing. In a way, the same thing happens with understanding. When we return to an idea years later, both the idea and the person encounter it are part of a different moment. History gives us countless examples of this spiral movement. Science works this way all the time. A theory explains the world for a while, but eventually new evidence appears. Scientists return to earlier ideas and rethink them, sometimes expanding them, sometimes correcting them. Philosophy works this way as well. Philosophers often revisit the same classic text, Plato, Aristotle, Confucius, and ask new questions that earlier generations never considered. Religious traditions also move in these cycles. Communities return to their scriptures during moments of crisis or change and suddenly see meanings that were always there but had gone previously unnoticed. In each of these cases, the past isn't thrown away, instead, it's revisited. This pattern suggests that the development of understanding depends on two forces working together: memory and renewal. Memory keeps us connected to what came before. Without memory, every generation would have to start from scratch. But renewal is just as important. Renewal prevents memory from becoming rigid. It allows inherited wisdom to breathe within new circumstances. When those two movements meet, memory and renewal, you get something like a spiral. You circle back, but each turn happens on a slightly different level. This way of thinking about understanding also changes how we think about revision. Sometimes revision means correcting a mistake, but often it means something deeper than that. Sometimes earlier interpretations were not wrong, they were simply incomplete for its time. A teaching that once seemed straightforward can take on entirely new meaning after years of life experience. The words stay the same, but the depth of perception has changed. Recognizing this requires a certain kind of humility. If understanding moves in spirals rather than straight lines, then certainty has to be held carefully. Convictions can still guide our lives, but we also remain open to the possibility that our understanding might deepen over time. What feels final today may look provisional tomorrow. That doesn't mean earlier insights were meaningless, it simply means they were part of a larger journey. This perspective also has important consequences for communities. If a community assumes that its interpretations can never be revisited, it risks becoming isolated from new knowledge and experience. But if a community throws away its traditions completely, it risks losing the wisdom that has accumulated over generations. The healthiest traditions tend to do something in between. They respect the past, but they also remain willing to revisit it. Interestingly, many religious rituals are built around this very idea. Annual festivals, seasonal observances, and repeated readings of sacred text create opportunities to return to the same stories again and again. But the people hearing those stories are different each time. Their lives have changed. Their struggles are different. Their understanding has grown. So the story speaks differently. What looks like repetition is actually a form of deepening. From this perspective, history itself begins to look like an ongoing conversation. Each generation receives ideas from the past, examines them, wrestles with them, questions them, and then passes them forward, often in slightly altered form. Sometimes that process moves slowly, sometimes it happens during moments of dramatic change, but the conversation continues. The spiral view of understanding also offers a helpful counterpoint to the illusion of a final truth we talked about earlier. If understanding moves in spirals, then claims of final completion start to look temporary. They mark genuine milestones in human thought, but they cannot stop the movement of reflection. Truth remains alive not because it's unstable, but because it's deeper than any single explanation. No one moment in history can fully capture it. Seeing things this way also encourages patience, both with the past and with the present. People in earlier generations did their best with the knowledge available to them. just as we're doing the best with the knowledge available to us. Their conclusions deserve thoughtful study, not quick dismissal. At the same time, our own conclusions should probably be held with a little humility as well. Future generations will almost certainly revisit the ideas we take for granted today. They will see things we cannot yet see. And that's not a failure of human understanding, it's part of how understanding grows. So the journey continues. We circle back to familiar insights, but each time we return with new awareness. What once looked like an ending becomes a doorway into deeper reflection. Truth is not abandoned in the process, and it's never fully captured either. Instead, we encounter it again and again, each time from a wider horizon. And perhaps that ongoing encounter, this continual movement of remembering, questioning, and renewing, is what it really means to participate on the search for truth.